Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's EBC video. We're in Hilltop, Minnesota today. We're thinking about the transfiguration story that exists in Mark 9 verses 2 through 9. You know, the transfiguration story happens on the top of a mountain, so what better place to come than Hilltop. We're also on our way to a track meet today, so this is a little bit of a throwback for those of you who've been watching EBC for a long time, a little bit of a throwback to another time we went to a city hall right before we were on our way to St. Cloud to see Jake throw. All right, so now let's get back to the transfiguration here. All right, let's just set the scene with the story first, and then we're going to talk about two main points. In the story, Jesus takes Peter and James and John up to a high mountain, and when he's there, he's turned dazzling white. His clothes are brighter than anything on earth can make them. And then Peter looks at it and he sees that Jesus is actually talking to Elijah and Moses, and he says, "It's great that we're here. We should make some tents for all three of you." And the Bible makes quite a point right there of saying that they didn't know what to say because they were terrified. All right, and then we go on to the end of that story. Suddenly everyone disappears. Jesus is there with his disciples, and as they're coming back down the mountain, Jesus says really specifically, "Don't tell anyone what you've seen." It's another one of those moments where right now he's saying, don't tell anyone what you've seen. Now, I'm going to start at that end where Jesus is saying, don't tell anyone. And we've talked a little bit before about those moments where Jesus says, don't say anything yet, or when he was casting out the demon and he said to the demon, "You can't tell people who I am." There's that room for faith in there, that room for us to discover Jesus. And that's one important piece of this. But I actually think in our everyday lives, there's another really important practical message here, right? And it's the fact that when Jesus is saying, don't say anything right now, he's also making sure that we're not losing Jesus's message, right? If the disciples had come down off the mountain and said, Jesus met with Elijah and Moses, I kind of got to think that's all anyone would have heard at that point, right? And all of the teaching that Jesus was about to do, all of the forgiveness of sins that Jesus was about to preach, all of the things that are in the good news might have been obscured by just everyone trying to figure out, did he really see Elijah? And we do that kind of thing in our lives too, right? We get really caught up in a little piece of the message and whether that actually happened, and we lose sight of the bigger picture. So I think that's one really big aspect of this. The second thing that I'm thinking about is the fact that Peter has that moment when he doesn't know what he's doing there, right? He sees this fantastic transfiguration and he's not sure how he's a part of it. So afraid, he just starts saying something. Let's make some tents, right? Now, this actually feels a little bit like reminiscent of a time in the Old Testament when King David is told by Nathan when he has the Ark of the Covenant that, and by the way, the Ark of the Covenant at the time is being put in a tent, and David thinks, I'm going to build a temple. And Nathan says, it is not your job to build a temple. Well, Peter didn't have that moment, right, where Nathan's there to say, that's not your job. Instead, Peter's like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to start saying something. All right, so just think about that in our everyday lives as well. What do we do when we're not sure where God is leading us, when we're not sure what our purpose is? How do we figure out what the next step is? Do we just sort of fill the silence with something? Or can we be patient enough to listen for a moment and hear what God wants us to do before we take the next step? Everyone, have a great week. Take a moment to listen for what God wants for you next.